Okay, we're starting with this because there's been a lot of mixed reaction to Bill Burr's SNL monologue that happened this past weekend. So he called out white women for hijacking the woke movement and for not acknowledging how we've contributed to racial oppression. So, what did you think of this opening bit and what he had to say?
Listen, I think a lot of people are going to say the delivery of the joke did not land. But for me, I just saw facts, 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 facts. Here is the truth. White women benefit when it comes to the conversations around diversity. And it is something a lot of people have a hard time with saying out loud. But these are the facts. Usually, when we talk about diversity, a lot of people take it as if it's women in general. I mean, BIPOC does include women, of course, but look at how many panels we've seen. And when we say, oh, wow, what a diverse panel. But when I see it, all I see is white woman, white woman, white woman, white woman. Diversity and gender parity are not one in the same. An interesting fact was, there are a lot of companies that were saying that they would like to see women at the upper levels when it comes to their C-suites and above. And there were 250 positions that they were willing to fill with a woman to get that number up there. Well, 150 of those spots went to white women. And so I think when you're talking to Black women, we always feel othered in the conversation, even when it comes to women and when it comes to that balance there. And so when you see a Black woman being hired, you see it as a racial hire as opposed to a diversity hire. And so I think we need to go back to the basics of that and talk about that fact when we're talking about diversity, because we've seen time and time again, civil rights movements, when it comes to feminism, white women are always at the forefront and they always gain and benefit. And that's just the truth.
I wasn't offended by Bill Burr's monologue, but I don't think he knocked it out of the park either. And I do wonder what precisely made particular white women absolutely furious. And I wondered if it was the messenger, the idea of it being a white man, and the old adage in comedy, like that you punch up, the idea that the jester makes fun of the king doesn't make fun of the jester. You go after people with more power than you have. And so maybe these furious women perceived it as Bill punching down. But I don't know if I can get there, just considering the context of what he was talking about. And, let's be honest, it hasn't been a particularly good year or 4 years or centuries for white people. So regardless of gender, 53% of white women voted for Trump. So I do feel like it was all fair sort of comedic fodder. But the one thing that did make me laugh, it was when he was going on about white women hijacking the woke movement, how they were advocating for BIPOC voices for about 8 seconds, and then somehow on Instagram it became about their struggle. That it made me laugh, but it also sort of made me nervous, because this is precisely why I think I have not been as vocal as I could be on Instagram, because the paralyzing fear I have of looking like I'm making an advertisement for how good of an ally I am makes me cringe. I want to be a good ally, but maybe I just don't want to advertise it. It's this very complicated sort of area that I'm in personally right now.
Well, Elena from Facebook wrote us and said, I loved his take on everything in that monologue. He is the George Carlin of our day, and it's a voice that is sorely needed in the way that we look at things today. If you're offended, check yourself. Okay, I'm checking myself. I still didn't think it was funny at all. I wasn't offended, but it really, in my opinion, wasn't funny. That doesn't mean that I don't agree with a lot of his points, but I felt like he was still workshopping the bit. Like, how comedians, they start things out and they try them out and they see where things land. I don't think it was very funny, period. And I feel like also a few seconds before he started critiquing white women, he was talking about John Wayne. So, right, the famous cowboy, right? And so people have been commenting a lot about John Wayne recently, because I think some old early interviews have resurfaced, and he said a lot of racist and very homophobic things. For example, he once said, "I believe in white supremacy until the blacks are educated to a point of responsibility." So just let that sink in for a moment. He defended John Wayne, or he criticized the idea of people trying to cancel him because he's been dead for a long time and he was born, in the early 1900s. He segued right out of that, by my memory, into critiquing white women. And for me, I just thought, like, like to defend that and then crap all over white women was just like a bit misogynistic to me. And I don't think that makes me fragile. I think it means I have good comedic taste. And I feel like if Dave Chappelle had been handed the same type of material, I feel like he actually has critiqued white women before, as he should. And then it can be like, it is still something to be laughed at. I can laugh at myself and also recognize the importance of comedy, drawing attention to things that make us feel uncomfortable. But in my opinion, Bill Burr just kind of
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think it goes back to what you said there, Jess, punching up versus punching down. And I think for some women, it was a good heavy dose of mansplaining, misogyny, and intersectionality to women from a white guy. I mean, I think it's the messenger is part of the problem here. And I also think, though, that he's not wrong. And I think, you know, to what you were saying, Kayla, he's not wrong. If you guys go back, and we know these stories very well, 2006 is when the Me Too movement actually began with Tarana Burke, and she is a Black woman. And yet it was only in, recent years when Alyssa Milano used the hashtag in describing her experiences with Harvey Weinstein. And what subsequently followed was a lot of very powerful white actresses in particular, also sharing the hashtag Me Too about their allegations against Harvey Weinstein. And so even though the hashtag is 11 or 14 years old, it was when some people say that a lot of white actresses took that hashtag and turned it into something else. We know that the BLM movement, Black Lives Matter, was started by 3 Black women. You know, so when we talk about movements that were started by Black women and then have sort of evolved and changed in the dominant culture, I think that's exactly what he's talking about. But I think it was Layla Saad who wrote White Supremacy and Me, and she was a guest on our show. And something she wrote about really struck me. And she was saying about, you know, we cannot make this the oppression Olympics. You know, like you have it tough, but I have it tough too. And I have it tough too. And the idea that we're starting to rank our oppression. And she says, we got to be really careful about that. And that my motto in all of this racial reckoning has been to check 2 things. Check my own privilege, even though, of course, everybody has challenges, but I have to understand where intersectionality still gives me privileges. Right. And I think that's what this is about. It's not about I have it worse. No, I have it worse. It's really about how do you still use your voice to make space for those who truly do have far less privileges than you do. I think that's where he was poking fun.
Well, Mel, like you said, privilege, but it seems as though in 2020, privilege has become this bad word that nobody wants to say. If we just own it and own our privilege, then we can just move forward.